Until he was 4 years old, James Henry Trotter had a happy life. He lived peacefully with his mother and father in a beautiful house beside the sea. Then one day, James's mother and father went to London to do some shopping, and there a terrible thing happened. Both of them got eaten up in full daylight, mind you, and on a crowded street by an enormous angry rhinoceros which had escaped from London Zoo. Poor James found himself alone in a vast, unfriendly world. The lovely house by the sea had to be sold immediately, and the little boy was sent away to live with his 2 aunts. Their names were Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker, and I'm sorry to say they were both really horrible people. They were selfish and lazy and cruel. And right from the beginning, they started beating poor James for no reason at all. They lived, Aunt Sponge, Aunt Spiker, and now James as well, in a queer, ramshackle house on the top of a high hill in the south of England. The hill was so high that from almost anywhere in the garden, James could look down and see for miles and miles across a marvelous landscape of woods and fields. But James was never allowed to go down off the top of that hill, and terrible punishments were promised him, such as being locked up in the cellar with the rats for a week if he ever so much as dared to climb over the fence. The garden, which covered the whole of the top of the hill, was large and desolate, and the only tree in the entire place was an ancient peach tree which never gave any peaches. After James Henry Trotter had been living with his aunts for 3 whole years, there came a morning when something rather peculiar happened to him. It all started on a blazing hot day in the middle of summer. Aunt Sponge, Aunt Spiker, and James were out in the garden. James had been put to work as usual. This time he was chopping wood. Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker were sitting comfortably in deck chairs nearby, 2 ghastly hags, sipping tall glasses of fizzy lemonade, and every now and again screaming at James to chop faster and faster. The heat was terrible. James began to cry. "Oh, Auntie Sponge," he sobbed, "and Auntie Spiker, couldn't we all please, just for once, go down to the seaside on the bus? It isn't very far, and I feel so hot and awful and lonely." "Why, you lazy, good-for-nothing brute!" Aunt Spiker shouted. "I shall beat you later on in the day when I don't feel so hot. Now, get out of my sight, you disgusting little worm, and give me some peace." James turned and ran. He ran as fast as he could to the far end of the garden and hid himself behind a clump of dirty old laurel bushes. Suddenly, just behind him, James heard a rustling of leaves, and he turned around and saw an old man in a funny dark green suit emerging from the bushes. He put a hand into the pocket of his jacket and took out a small white paper bag. "You see this?" he whispered. "You know what's inside this little bag? Take a look, my dear." And he opened the bag and tilted it towards James. Inside it, James could see a mass of tiny green things. There was a strange brightness about them, a sort of luminous quality that made them glow and sparkle in the most wonderful way. "Listen to 'em," the old man whispered. "Listen to them move." James stared into the bag, and sure enough, there was a faint rustling sound, and he noticed that all the thousands of little green things were slowly stirring about and moving over each other as though they were alive. "There's more magic and power in those things than in all the rest of the world put together," the old man said softly. "But what are they?" murmured James. "Where did they come from?" "Ah!" the old man whispered. "You never guessed that." And at once he pushed the paper bag into James's hands and said, "Here, you take it. It's yours." James stood there, clutching the bag. "Now, all you got to do is this," said the old man. "Take a large jug of water and pour all the little green things into it. In a couple of minutes, the water will begin to froth and bubble furiously, and as soon as that happens, you must quickly drink it all down, the whole jugful, in one gulp. And immediately after that, marvelous things will happen to you, fabulous, unbelievable things, and you will never be miserable again in your life. Because you are miserable, aren't you? You needn't tell me. I know all about it. Now, you do exactly as I say. Don't whisper a word of this to those 2 horrible aunts of yours, and don't let those green things in there get away from you either, because if they do escape, then they will be working their magic upon somebody else instead of upon you. And that isn't what you want at all, is it, my dear? Whoever they meet first, be it bug, insect, animal, or tree, that will be the one who gets the full power of their magic. So hold the bag tight. Off you go. Hurry up. Don't wait." And with that, the old man turned away and disappeared into the bushes. The next moment, James was running back to the house as fast as he could go, but suddenly, just as he was passing underneath the old peach tree, his foot slipped and he fell flat on his face in the grass. The paper bag burst open, and the thousands of tiny green things were scattered in all directions. James immediately picked himself up onto his hands and knees and started searching for his precious treasures. But what was this? In the space of only a few seconds, every single one of them had gone. James felt like crying. But where had they gone to? There was nothing down there, nothing except the roots of an old peach tree and a whole lot of earthworms and centipedes and insects living in the soil. But what was it that old man had said? Whoever they meet first, be it bug, insect, animal, or tree, that will be the one who gets the full power of their magic. Good heavens, thought James. What if they do go into the roots of the tree? Get up at once, you lazy little beast! A voice was suddenly shouting in James's ear. James glanced up and saw Aunt Spiker standing over him. Get back over there immediately and finish chopping up those logs, she ordered. Slowly, sadly, poor James got up off the ground, picked up the chopper, and was about to start chopping again when he heard a shout behind him. Sponge! Sponge, come here at once and look at this! At what? It's a peach! Aunt Spiker was shouting. A what? A peach! Right up there, on the highest branch! Can't you see it? Good gracious me, well, I'll be blowed. There really is a peach up there. A nice big one, too, Aunt Spiker said. Oh, a beauty, Aunt Sponge cried out. At this point, James slowly put down his chopper and turned and looked across at the two women. Something is about to happen, he told himself. Something peculiar is about to happen any moment. James tiptoed a little closer to the tree. The aunts were staring at the peach. It looks ripe to me, Aunt Spiker said. Then why don't we eat it? Aunt Sponge suggested, licking her thick lips. We can have half each. Hey, you, James, come over here at once and climb this tree. James crossed to the tree trunk. Stop! Aunt Spiker said quickly. Hold everything! She was staring up at the branches with her eyes bulging as though she'd seen a ghost. Look, she said. Look, Sponge, look! What's the matter with you? Aunt Sponge demanded. It's growing! Aunt Spiker cried. It's getting bigger and bigger. What is? The peach, of course! You're joking. Well, look for yourself. But, my dear Spiker, that's perfectly ridiculous. That's the... No, wait just a minute. No, that can't be right. No, yes, great Scott, the thing really is growing. The two women and the small boy stood gazing up at the extraordinary fruit. In half a minute, it was the size of a melon. In another half minute, it was twice as big again. Will it ever stop? Aunt Sponge shouted. Bigger and bigger grew the peach, bigger and bigger and bigger. Then at last, when it had become nearly as tall as the tree it was growing on, the bottom of it touched the ground gently, and there it rested. The skin of the peach was very beautiful, a rich buttery yellow with patches of brilliant pink and red. Aunt Sponge advanced cautiously and touched it with the tip of one finger. It's ripe, she cried. Now look here, Spiker. Why don't we go and get a shovel right away and dig out a great chunk of it for you and me to eat? No, Aunt Spiker said. Not yet. There's a pile of money to be made out of this, if only we can handle it right. You wait and see. The news that a peach as big as a house had suddenly appeared in someone's garden spread like wildfire across the countryside, and the next day a stream of people came scrambling up the hill to gaze upon this marvel. Roll up, Aunt Spiker yelled. Only 1 shilling to see the giant peach. Half price for children under 6 weeks old, Aunt Sponge shouted, and the money came rolling into the pockets of the two greedy aunts. But while all the excitement was going on outside, poor James was forced to stay locked in his bedroom, peeping through the bars of his window at the crowds below. When the evening came and the people had all gone home, the aunts unlocked James's door and ordered him to go outside and pick up all the banana skins and orange peel and bits of paper that the crowd had left behind. But it's dark, cried James. Get out, they yelled, and stay out until you've cleaned up all the mess. The door slammed, the key turned in the lock. Hungry and trembling, James stood alone out in the open, wondering what to do. And then, all at once, Little shivers of excitement started running over the skin on his back. Something else, he told himself, something stranger than ever this time, is about to happen to me again soon. He was sure of it. He'd feel it coming. And then he happened to notice, close to the ground, there was a hole in the side of the peach, quite a large hole. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept on crawling. This isn't a hole, he thought excitedly. It's a tunnel. He was crawling uphill now, as though the tunnel were leading straight towards the very center of the gigantic fruit. There was a small door cut into the face of the peach stone. He gave a push. It swung open. He crawled through it, and before he'd time to glance up and see where he was, he heard a voice saying, "Look who's here." And another one said, "We've been waiting for you." James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel the way he'd come, but the doorway had disappeared. There was now only a solid wall behind him. Tomorrow I'll tell you what happens next. Until then, goodbye.